Air Force One is currently crossing the Pacific Ocean. Aboard the modified 747 is the President of the United States, heading toward Beijing for an intensely monitored diplomatic summit. But the passenger manifest looks more like a corporate boardroom than a political delegation. Sitting in the cabin are 17 of America's most powerful corporate leaders, including Apple's Tim Cook and Tesla's Elon Musk. When the initial passenger list was circulated to the press, it highlighted the heavyweights of American industry. However, it completely left off the CEO of a company worth over $3 trillion. The omission sent reporters scrambling, forcing the administration to clarify the actual flight plan. Air Force One took off from Washington, D.C., but made a quiet midpoint layover in Alaska to pick up NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, keeping him out of the initial spotlight. NVIDIA's valuation hovers near $5 trillion, with its chips physically powering the global artificial intelligence boom. The decision to pick up the CEO mid-flight marks his presence as a central, necessary component of the president's mission to Beijing. For years, Washington attempted a straightforward strategy to outcompete Chinese manufacturing: apply massive tariffs to make imported goods more expensive. Beijing retaliated not by matching every tariff dollar for dollar, but by hitting specific American exports where it hurt the most. They completely froze the purchase of American-made commercial airplanes. This chart shows the total trade volume between the two nations, which sits at roughly $650 billion. Notice the massive gap. By halting major American purchases while continuing to export consumer goods, China maintains a net trade surplus of over $200 billion every single year. The presence of Boeing's CEO on the current flight is a direct attempt to fix this math. The U.S. delegation needs to unfreeze a stalled deal for hundreds of 737 MAX and wide-body jets to forcefully inject billions of dollars back into the American side of the ledger. American exports rely heavily on these massive, high-value contracts, like aircraft and specialized machinery. Meanwhile, Chinese ports continuously flood the United States with high volumes of cheaper consumer electronics, metals, and chemical products. The tariff strategy failed to close the gap. Now, American leaders must fly directly to Beijing to personally broker the massive corporate sales required to balance the books. While selling airplanes fixes the immediate deficit, bringing tech leaders like Elon Musk and Jensen Huang addresses a very different kind of pressure on the American economy. The transition to electric vehicles and advanced AI relies entirely on specific physical materials known as rare earth minerals. Without these metals, the magnets in EV motors and the processing chips in data centers cannot be manufactured. This map shows the global distribution network for these materials. Look closely at the central hub. China currently controls roughly 70% of the world's supply share for rare earth exports. During the height of the tariff disputes, Beijing proved exactly how willing they are to use this leverage. They suspended the export of critical minerals, creating immediate supply chain bottlenecks that actively stalled American semiconductor manufacturing. China now produces 5 times the volume of electric vehicles as its American rivals, and competes directly with Western software through domestic AI models like DeepSeek. American technology titans have the capital and the engineering talent, but they cannot build the future if Beijing decides to shut off the raw materials required to physically construct it. The corporate stakes are mirrored by military tensions. Washington is currently attempting to push through billions of dollars in weapons sales to Taiwan, a move that directly provokes Beijing. To counter American influence in the Pacific, China executes an asymmetrical strategy in the Middle East. They provide steady diplomatic cover and actively supply critical hardware, including drones and weapons components, to Iran. That relationship gives Beijing immense leverage over the global energy supply chain. The United States requires stability in the Strait of Hormuz to keep commercial oil tankers moving and prevent global energy prices from spiking. Securing those shipping lanes and managing Middle Eastern stability requires a level of Iranian cooperation that currently only Beijing can facilitate. Before the president's plane even touches down, the Chinese embassy in the United States releases a public statement outlining strict parameters for the summit. They issued a preemptive set of non-negotiable demands, framing them as the 4 red lines. The memo explicitly forbids the U.S. delegation from crossing certain boundaries during the talks. There is to be no lecturing on Taiwan, no interference regarding human rights, and zero attempts to dictate China's internal political and developmental systems. When the American delegation last made this trip in 2017, they arrived with the expectation of extracting concessions from a developing rival. Today, the leverage has shifted. The recipient of these demands is dealing with a Chinese leadership that recognizes its control over rare earth minerals, manufacturing output, and critical geopolitical choke points. As these CEOs step onto the tarmac in Beijing, they enter a room where 70% of their raw materials and $200 billion of trade volume are on the table. The terms of this meeting aren't set in Washington. They are being bartered in